Security.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I would ask all our participants and those citizens who are observing through open meeting laws to please make sure your microphone is on mute until you are prepared to speak, and we're grateful you're here. I now call this meeting of the Executive Council to order. As chair of the Executive Council, I have determined that an in-person meeting was not practical or prudent due to the current COVID-19 health pandemic. As is permitted under Chapter 12 of Minnesota statutes and the open meeting laws, in these conditions, this meeting of the Executive Council is being conducted virtually. We will call all votes to be counted by a roll call vote. I would now call for a motion to approve the draft minutes of the regularly scheduled Executive Council meeting held on August 25th, 2021, and the special Executive Council meeting that was held on October 29th, 2021. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
At this time, I would now ask that each member of the Executive Council to state their vote. Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote on approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. At this time, I would recognize Minnesota Management and Budget Assistant Commissioner Jennifer Hassemer to present a request to approve collateral for state funds. Assistant Commissioner Hassemer, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Great, thank you, Governor, and good morning to members of the Executive Council. For the record, I'm Jennifer Hassemer, Assistant Commissioner at Minnesota Management and Budget. This first agenda item is a request for the approval of new collateral used to secure state funds on deposit at 4 of the state's banks. Executive Council approval is required by Minnesota Statute Section 9.031, Subdivisions 2 and 3. The collateral listed on the memo represents the replacement of previously approved collateral that is maturing. I'm requesting your approval of this agenda item and will pause here for any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. At this time, I would ask if there's any questions from members of the Executive Council. Hearing none, I would call for a motion of approval.
So moved. Blaha.
At this time, I would ask each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha, how do you vote?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan?
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. I once again recognize MMB Assistant Commissioner Hassemer to present a request to approve refunding certain state general obligation bonds. You are recognized for as much time as you may consume, Assistant Commissioner.
Great, thank you again, Governor. So the second agenda item is a request for the approval to issue state bonds to refund outstanding general obligation bonds pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 16A 66, Subdivision 1. MMB regularly reviews the feasibility of refunding outstanding general obligation bonds in order to reduce the state's future debt service obligations. We anticipate the next opportunity to refund outstanding general obligation bonds will be in fiscal year 2023 if interest rates continue to remain low and conditions result in attractive refunding opportunities for the state. The resolution attached to the meeting materials lists several issues of general obligation bonds to which this request would apply. These represent the bonds that the state has issued since the last time we brought a similar request before the Executive Council. I'm requesting your approval of this resolution today and will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. I would remind members of the viewing public that all of this information is provided to members of the Executive Council weeks in advance. Our staff works on it. There are also public documents for anyone to be able to have access to. With that being said, I would ask, are there any questions regarding the proposal in front of us from the Executive Council? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the request.
So moved.
I'll now call roll call vote of all members. Secretary of State Simon, how do you vote?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. I'd now like to recognize Evan Johnson, Disaster Lead for the Property Tax Division at the Department of Revenue, to present a request to designate Lake County as a declared disaster area for property tax relief.
Good
Mr.
morning, Mr.
Johnson,
Chair,
you are
members.
recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the council. My name is Eben Johnson. I'm one of the disaster leads for the Property Tax Division of the Department of Revenue. I'm here to present an application on behalf of Lake County for the county to be declared a disaster area pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 273.1231 as a result of the Greenwood fire earlier this year. The declaration would primarily allow the state to reimburse the county for property tax relief that has been granted to property owners who were affected by the fire. I am happy to answer any questions you have about the application or disaster relief provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions from members of the Executive Council regarding the designation of Lake County as a disaster area for property tax relief? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the request.
So moved.
So moved.
I would now ask each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan?
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. Is there any further discussion from members of the Executive Council? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll now call roll call vote of all members. Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan?
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. This meeting of the Executive Council is now adjourned. We'll say goodbye to the Lieutenant Governor before moving towards State Board of Investments. Thank
Thanks
you,
so much,
Lieutenant Governor.
everybody. Have a good day.
At this time, I'd now call the meeting of the State Board of Investments to order. As chair of the State Board of Investments, I've determined that an in-person meeting was not practical or prudent due to the current COVID-19 health pandemic. As is permitted under Minnesota Statutes Chapter 12 and under the open meeting law in these conditions, this meeting of the State Board of Investments is being conducted virtually, and all votes will be counted with a roll call vote. I would now call for a motion to approve the draft minutes of the August 25th, 2021 SBI meeting.
So moved.
I now ask each member to state their vote on approval of the minutes. Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The minutes of the August 25th, 2021 SBI meeting are approved. I'd now like to recognize Executive Director Perry to report on SBI performance summary and the Executive Director's administrative report. Executive Director Perry, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Good morning, Governor and members. If we turn to tab A, I'll take us through the performance summary. You'll notice on page 2 of tab A, our funds under management at the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year. We were responsible for almost $128 billion, $90 billion of which represented the combined pension funds. If you turn the page, you'll see that we continue to meet our long-term objectives of being above the composite index for 10 years, which we were 40 basis points above, and we produced a real return of 6.5% over the 20-year period. If you look down on the on page 4 of the report, you'll see that for all reporting periods, we either matched or were above our composite index. Turning the page, you'll see that on page 5 that we were pretty much in line with our asset mix and the our strategic asset allocation. Our performance for each of the asset classes, unfortunately, public equities were a lot less robust than they have been. We declined by about a percentage point, primarily due to our international equity assets in the first quarter. But you'll still see that for the last 12 months, our total public equity return was 30.2%. Our fixed income program for the first quarter, we're pretty much even with the benchmark, adding about 10 basis points to the return to the portfolio. And our private markets portfolio in the first quarter, we had a return of 9.4%, resulting in a 12-month return of 42.1%. If you turn the page, you'll see that we're still pretty much in line with our asset allocation framework, which is really just there to give a picture of how risky the portfolio is. And, given our equity orientation, we will continue to have a pretty risky portfolio, but that's been the primary driver of the performance we've received the past several years. But if you look down to page 10, you'll see that on a risk-adjusted basis that we have continued to add value versus our volatility equivalent benchmark. If you turn the page to page 12, you'll see that for the quarter, primarily due to our public equity performance, we were in the second quartile, but reported first quartile performance versus all public funds over $20 billion for all periods reporting out to 30 years. And you'll have on the next page, you'll just see a little bit more details of how we get there. If you turn to page B, I'll give my tab B, I'll give my administrative report. In our report, you'll see that we are ahead of our budget, as has been our practice for quite some time. And there's been no travel due primarily to the pandemic. The auditors are, the legislative auditors are going through our books for fiscal 21. We will inform the board and others once they are completed with the audit, at which point we will be able to produce our annual report, which this year will also include the first pass through of providing a stewardship report, which will discuss our ESG activities over the past year. Item number 4 is the temporary meeting dates that are set for calendar 22. I believe my assistant, Char Olson, has checked with all of your offices, but we do notice that once in a while the dates for the state board meeting may vary. We've also given status of our reports versus the statutes for Sudan and Iran exposure in the portfolio. And as far as I know, as of this morning, we had no significant litigation that we were involved in. Governor members, that's the end of my executive report.
Thank you, Director Perry. At this time, I would ask members of the Executive Council if they have any questions. There's no motion or vote needed. And I would also let the viewing public know you are welcome to turn off your cameras so you can, until you're on, if you'd like to drink your coffee in peace, but you're welcome to keep them on or stay with us. But Executive Council, any questions on the Director's performance summary or administrative reports? Auditor Blaha, you are recognized.
Thank you, Governor. First off, again, I think our performance is very solid considering where we are. And I noticed that one word that remind people that when Mansco Perry says pretty risky, that's not that risky. So our version of risky is different than other people's version of risky when it comes to public funds. But I was wondering if you wanted, to talk a little bit, and maybe I just want to make sure it's not somewhere else on the agenda, but I think the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force is doing some really interesting things, and particularly when it comes to, and maybe Gary will speak to this, but coming to how they're handling data and the idea of getting very concrete in moving disclosure as a way to not only help us make better investment decisions, but to really drive better behavior. And pardon me if that's in Gary's report, but I don't know if we want to speak a little more to that, because I think that's really quite impressive to see the level of concrete.
Yeah, thank you, Auditor. Director, you do have your ESG report later on, but if you are certainly welcome to address the auditor's question now or whatever it's most appropriate for you.
Well, I'll address this particular question now, Governor. The task force has only had one meeting, so I'd say that we're very much in the early stages. And at this juncture, there's really nothing to report other than that the task force is beginning to outline things that they believe are necessary to tackle to give us better profile, both at the staff and manager level with DEI. I really don't have anything to report other than the fact that we've got a pretty robust committee, and think that over the course of the next year and a half, which was the time frame that was originally set up, that we'll see some significant progress. Really excited about the group that we've got together. If Chairman Martin would like to add a few words, as he is also a member of the task force.
Sure, I would just echo Executive Director Perry's comment. You know, we've just had one initial meeting, kind of a kickoff meeting. We do have a follow-up meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, but really at this point, looking more for information gathering and kind of taking an assessment of where we are currently at before determining kind of what are the objectives and where can we go moving forward. But really just getting started, but I think we've got a good group, and excited to be working on it.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Thank you, Director. Auditor, we'll have a little more on ESG later on some of the initiatives around decarbonization and those things. So
I guess just when, just if you've been on a group before, you can tell how they kick off, just how serious they are. And you could tell even from that first meeting, this has great potential. So thank you.
And thank you, Auditor, and I echo those sentiments. At this time, I'd like to recognize John Muley, Director of Legal, Legislative Policy, and Shareholder Services, SBI, to deliver a request to adopt a resolution related to a legislative proposal. Director Muley, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you, Governor and members. My name is John Muley. I'm the Director of Legal and Legislative Policy here at the SBI. In your tab C, you have an updated tab C that you should have received. There is a memo regarding the purpose of the legislation, as well as an updated resolution. I won't cover all the details that are in the memo. I'll just give you the highlights, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. The SBI updated its salary plan in 2019, which is approved by the board and the legislature. And one of the features of that plan was to add 3 investment analyst positions to the investment salary plan: a junior, intermediate, and senior investment analyst. The goal there was to create a path of advancement through the organization that didn't exist in prior plans. When the plan passed, we began to implement the classifications from the new plan. And as we were preparing to hire for those analyst positions, in our conversations with human resources and management and budget, we discovered that there was a bit of a conflict in the relationship between our plan and the Public Employment Labor Relations Act. I am not an expert on PELRA, but I will give you kind of the essence of what the issue is. The issue is really that because of the types of positions that these analysts hold, they are without some sort of overriding statute or exemption, they would be covered by PELRA, and therefore would have to be implemented through one of the bargaining units at the state rather than through the SBI's investment salary plan. So we had some internal discussions and looked at some different potential solutions, and through those discussions and with technical assistance from MMB, determined that a legislative solution was really the clearest and best way to address this issue so that we could fully implement the plan as it was passed by the board and legislature in 2019. Currently, we are looking at a couple different formulations of language. We're having some conversations with stakeholders and again, having some technical assistance from MMB on making sure we get the language right to cover the issue. And we'll continue to do that throughout the process. What we're looking for is the authorization to begin pursuing the legislation through formal authorship and through legislative channels that we would need to get the bill in front of different committees. There is a second piece to the proposal that we are hoping to address, which is the threshold issue of determining the types of roles that are covered by the SBI salary plan. We've had some conversations in the past internally on this, as well as with MMB and HR, and what we've discovered is that the language in the statute doesn't really fit the current structure of the SBI very well, so it is oftentimes difficult and unclear as to who should be covered from the SBI's investment salary plan. So what we're hoping to do is update that threshold determination language to better capture the roles that SBI staff members hold in the investment team. And with that, those are the two major pieces. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Muley. To the Executive Council, what we're going to be asked for, and I'll ask for a resolution on, is just to move the legislative proposals forward. You're not making any determination or voting on how that would be implemented. It just lets the process start. Is that a correct characterization, Director Muley?
That's correct. As we know, the legislative process is long and winding, and we will, address any issues that come up at the time and keep your offices informed of any updates that we have.
Long and winding. Thank you, Director Muley. So at this point in time, I'd ask Executive Council any questions regarding the proposal to start the legislative proposal process. Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
I would now ask each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries, the resolution is adopted, and you move forward, Director Muley, and thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Gary Martin, Chair of our Investment Advisory Council, to deliver the private market investment reports. I would note that there will be a vote on this at the end, but before that happens, I will be recognizing members of the public who wish to weigh in on this. At this time, I would recognize Chair Martin for as much time as you may consume.
Great, thank you, and good morning, Governor and members. The Investment Advisory Council met with the Executive Director and his staff to review staff's due diligence and recommendations for commitments to 8 private market investment funds. These 8 commitment recommendations total approximately $1,070 million and are listed on page 1 under tab D in your meeting materials. All of the commitment recommendations are with existing managers with whom the SBI has historically had very successful relationships. The Council's discussions with staff focused on each general partner's organization and staff, their investment strategy, the market opportunity, historical performance, as well as ESG and diversity and inclusion considerations. 6 of the commitment recommendations are in the private equity sector, 1 is in private credit, and the final is in the real estate sector. The 6 private equity fund commitments include the following funds. Arsenal Capital Partners Fund 6 will make private equity investments in U.S. middle market healthcare and industrials companies. Arsenal specializes in investments in industrials and healthcare sectors due to their attractive growth trends, large number of technology and innovation-rich companies, and opportunities to create value-added solutions. Permira Fund 8 will focus on growth buyout transactions in market-leading, often market-creating companies with resilient business models benefiting from strong underlying growth trends. The fund will take a broad approach across sectors and geographies to ensure that the capital will be deployed into the most attractive risk-adjusted opportunities at any point in the market cycle. Warburg Pincus is establishing its Global Growth Fund 14 that will continue the firm's long history of equity investing in high-growth companies globally. While Warburg is primarily a growth-oriented investor, it maintains the flexibility to invest in transactions of various sizes and types, from early growth platforms to later stage transactions. But a common thread in all the deals is a focus on growth as a key aspect of the investment thesis. The fourth fund is Blackstone. They're forming their Strategic Partners Fund 9 to seek capital appreciation, primarily through the purchase of secondary interest in mature, high-quality leverage buyout funds from investors seeking liquidity prior to the termination of these funds, with secondary interest in mezzanine, venture capital, distressed securities, and perhaps fund of funds. Lexington Partners is raising its 10th fund to continue their historically successful strategy of acquiring interest in global private equity funds and other investment vehicles, primarily through negotiated secondary market purchases. Lexington intends to construct a diversified portfolio of secondary interest in established global private investment funds at attractive discounts to market value. The sixth private equity fund is Whitehorse. They're forming their Fund 5 to make preferred equity investments in private equity portfolios. Their strategy is to provide counterparties with liquidity solutions for their private equity portfolios through the creation of preferred securities. Whitehorse believes this strategy has the potential to provide compelling risk-adjusted returns for the fund. The seventh commitment recommendation is in the private credit space. Marathon Asset Management is establishing its Secured Private Strategies Fund 3 to invest in asset-based cash flowing investments in the private credit markets. Marathon believes there's an opportunity to earn attractive risk-adjusted returns for providing capital solutions to creditworthy and underserved borrowers and capitalizing on illiquidity and complexity premia found within non-traditional lending channels. The eighth and final commitment recommendation is in the real estate sector with Landmark Partners. Landmark is establishing its 9th real estate fund to continue its historically successful strategy of making secondary investments in various types of real estate and real estate-related entities. The fund is expected to provide investors with attractive returns with lower levels of risk compared with direct primary investments in real estate vehicles. Based on our review of the materials and our discussions with staff, the IEC has endorsed staff's recommendations for commitments to each of these 8 private market investment opportunities, as we believe each of these commitments would provide attractive risk-adjusted returns for the SBI's investment portfolio. That concludes my prepared remarks, but I'd be happy to address any comments or questions that the members may have on any of these 8 private market commitment recommendations.
Thank you, Chair Martin. At this time, I would ask if there's any members of the board that would like to address Chair Martin, and we will be hearing from members of the public immediately after this. So if there are any questions now, or if you'd like to hold your questions to the end.
Yeah, the meeting.
Hearing none from the board at this time, we had requests from the public to address the board regarding one of the recommended private market commitments. Representatives from Renters United for Justice, you may present your testimony at this time. Please limit your total time to 5 minutes and you are recognized.
Good morning. My name is Shanika Henderson. I'm a resident of North Minneapolis and a member of the United Renters for Justice. The Minnesota State Board of Investments has a $150 million investment with Landmark Partners and Aries Company. So in January of 2021, Aries Management acquired rental home companies, Front Yard Residential, and joint ventures with Pretium Partners, the country's second largest owner of single-family rental homes. Additionally, Aries Management, through the subsidiaries, is invested with Pretium Partners single-family rental companies, Front Yard Residential, and Havenbrook Homes Company that directly own and rent multiple single-family homes in North Minneapolis. In August, I shared with the Board of State Investments, I have a special needs child, and I rent also from Havenbrook, and we needed to move to a larger home to accommodate my families and those needs. I explained that I asked Havenbrook if I could move into a larger home that they had available for rent, and I was told that I would have to apply as if I was a new renter, paying all the new renter fees. Currently, I still live in the same home. The city has come out to my home multiple times to inspect since August, and about 50% of the work has been done and completed. I still am dealing with multiple issues in my home, including and not limited to my porch caving in, my basement has moles, I have leaks, leaky roofs, squirrels in the basement, and it's super hot in the summertime. which causes my sons to have multiple health issues, and the company has done nothing to resolve these issues. Furthermore, Havenbrook communication has been a long and complex thing to even deal with this company. And a lot of miscommunication with them not showing up when they need to do the scheduled repairs. They moved out of their Roseville office in about August, and we have not received any forwarding addresses for the company of Havenbrook. As a resident of North Minneapolis, investors, I am asking if you would reach out to Landmark Partners and Aries Company to inquire about the maintenance of their properties in Minneapolis before winter sets in, which is almost here as we are speaking now. We also are looking to ask that the investors for Landmarks, until they address the conditions of the thousands of single-family homes that it owns and rents to low-income people. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else from Renters United?
Yes, my name is Ariana Anderson. Good afternoon, good morning, Chair and members of the board. I'm a resident of North Minneapolis and a member of Renters United for Justice. I have been working with the City of Minneapolis since July of 2021 to address the various health and safety hazards in my Havenbrook home. Myself, spouse, and my 5 children have been living with mice infestations, electrical issues, buckling floorboards, heat not working in all the rooms, and foundation issues. When the city or state is monitoring them, they're responsive. But as soon as there's no pressure, they're not responsive at all to my concerns. They will say they're doing something and then disappear. And it's difficult to communicate with them as they are not transparent about changes or who to call or email. Since August, there have been many staff changes, including our main contact as tenants. She's no longer working there. They're not upfront with who to go to, and oftentimes when you get a hold of someone, they have an awful attitude towards you. I'm also asking, as a resident of North Minneapolis, investors, I'm asking if you would reach out to Landmark Partners and Aries Company to inquire about the maintenance of the properties in Minneapolis before winter sets in. We are also asking that you not invest in Landmark until they adequately address the concerns of the thousands of single-family homes they own and rent to low-income people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. We have time for, I believe, one more. Please proceed, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Angela Bonfilio. I'm an organizer with Renters United for Justice. Since August, when we were last here, Havenbrook residents have filed tenant complaints with the City of Minneapolis and have had many housing license inspection in over 60 Havenbrook homes. Currently, Havenbrook has 562 outstanding open violations from the city for those homes, including over 50 urgent life and safety violations that are unresolved. Life and safety violations include the need for carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, and hazardous wiring. Other violations tenants are encountering include, but aren't limited to, mice, rodent infestation, mold in the homes, sheetrock collapsing on the ceilings, outstanding plumbing issues, and faulty electrical wiring. Tenants are having trouble contacting Havenbrook representatives when they report repairs. Recently, tenants have had third-party contractors assigned to the repairs, which has caused some confusion. Tenants may not know a contractor has been assigned to their repair. Contractors will sometimes just show up without any notice, or they'll say they're coming back after taking photos of the work to do a quote, and then the tenant hears nothing. Havenbrook has brought in out-of-state contractors for a few weeks in September to reduce the reported 217 outstanding work orders, according to an Aries executive, Frank Burgess, in the Alameda County Retirement Fund meeting in September. Unfortunately, some of the work was not up to Minnesota Building Code standards, according to a Minneapolis city inspector. These contractors were only here for a short amount of time, and since they left, repairs seem to have slowed significantly or stopped in many houses. In addition to the violations, tenants are also grappling with rent increases and additional fees during the pandemic while these repairs are not being done. Tenants organized a trip to the Roseville office to express their concerns in August, and no one was at the office and no one answered their concerns. John, a Havenbrook maintenance staff, informed myself and other inspectors at a tenant inspection that Havenbrook no longer had the office in Roseville, but there was no new office yet. Tenants have not received a new address at this point or a physical location to be able to bring forward concerns or contact Havenbrook. Investors were asking you to please reach out to Landmark Partners, an Aries company, to inquire about the maintenance of their properties in Minneapolis before winter sets in. And we're also asking that you not invest in Landmark until it adequately addresses the conditions of thousands of single-family homes it rents and owns to low-income people across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask if possible for our presenters from Renters United to please stay on. And I do believe we have a representative from Landmark Partners who would like to present. If that individual would like to present, you are recognized for 5 minutes. At that time, members of the board, we can ask questions of all involved parties. So Landmark Partners, you are recognized.
Thank you, Governor. I'm Frank Borges. I lead Landmark Partners and appreciate the opportunity to speak with the board today. Along with me is Paul Melman, who's one of our senior real estate folks. In August, when we were made aware of the repair issues, we immediately took steps to meet with Pradium, at which point we indicated to them that these issues were raised and that we needed a plan to address them immediately. We did that, and at the time, I believe, Paul, you had statistics, there were about 380 outstanding back orders. Now, one of the things to keep in mind—
I'll correct that number, it was 217.
217. One of the things which I will share is that we acquired our investment was in January. These maintenance issues were prior to our acquisitions. That's not an excuse. And so we took it upon ourselves to address with Pradium. And Pradium has, in fact, put people on the ground. Many of them were outside contractors because there was a shortage of labor to address the issues. With that, maybe, Paul, you've got statistics on both the plan and where we are against the plan.
Yes, let me provide some details here. So there were 217 outstanding work orders in the tracking. There are only 8 of those that remain outstanding. So we've seen in the tracking of this with the manager that they've achieved a turn on work orders, and the number of work orders that are 10 days or older across the portfolio have declined 60% between the start of this in September and the implementation of that plan and where we stand today. The implementation of that plan involved significant increases in staffing. So that included bringing in maintenance technicians who are employees of Pradium but work in other regions to immediately address these issues, as well as undertaking permanent new hires. Pradium has more than doubled its staffing. In addition to that, there are certain types of work that need to be done by vendors, outside contractors who have specialized skills. And Pradium has significantly increased the number of contractors that they qualify to do that. The focus in terms of prioritization of addressing the work orders is, of course, placing highest priority on the life and safety issues as we understand how Pradium manages the pipeline of work order requests.
You may also want to, when this first occurred, not only did we meet with Pradium and ask them to put a plan in place immediately to address the issues, Paul and I did go out to visit the properties because we thought it was important to go out and visit the properties to underscore the importance of making sure that these maintenance issues were addressed. With that, the plan was put in place, and it's really done. It made lots of progress to the extent that there's a minimal number of issues. Now, to the extent that a couple of ones that have just been mentioned, and certainly Angela, I didn't get your last name. To the extent that you've got an issue with your unit affecting your child, I will personally follow up on that one, because clearly, to the extent that there are issues there that affect the health and safety of your child, we'll certainly make sure to do that.
And a key element is making sure that all of these requests get registered as work orders. But again, the program that the manager has in place to address the maintenance needs of this portfolio has been significantly expanded, and that staffing remains in place as we speak.
Thank you, Mr. Melman. Thank you, Mr. Borges. I think at this time, and thank you to members of Renters United and to the board, this is a good time to ask questions. The viewing public who's watching this, that the state and the members of this board have a fiduciary responsibility to our pensions and to the state's assets. What we're talking about here is a private market investment. Mr. Martin heads that up as the chair. Director Perry oversees the whole board, and members of this board vote on these. And what you're seeing is the engagement of the public where those investments come to them, plus trying to engage with the property management in Havenbrook. The state is not investing in Havenbrook, they're investing in Landmark, but from a tenant's perspective, it's still an impact on them. So I just state that to where we're at. I'm grateful that both Landmark is here and Renters United and the board is here to listen. I think maybe at this time I will turn to members of the board if there are questions to ask. I think obviously all of us are familiar with this because this issue has been with us for for quite some time. So I will turn it to the board and recognize anyone who wishes to ask questions or add comment.
Mr. Chairman.
Attorney General, you're recognized.
My comments are going to be very brief. But I will say that my office has been made aware of complaints, and we take them seriously. I'll say that we recently concluded a case against a gentleman by the name of Stephen Meldal, where we had to bring an action to enforce Minnesota state statutes regarding lease provisions and other measures regarding habitability. And from the standpoint of my office, our bread and butter is consumer protection, and we consider tenants consumers. Now, that's different from my role here at SBI, but in my other hat, it's nothing that I can ignore. And I'll just stop right there.
Thank you, Attorney General. If I could ask, if members of Renters United are still here, and again, I want to recognize that Mr. Borges and Mr. Melman are here from Landmark. They do not run the properties. They do not own them. And I hope clarification from both of you on that. But the request from the renters is to use the leverage that Landmark had to improve their living conditions. I think I would ask the folks from Renters United if you've seen some progress or what you've seen, what you'd like to see in addition to what you've already seen, and what would give you comfort that this is a good investment and the leverage that Landmark is able to exert is actually changing behavior. So I will turn to members of Renters United.
Thank you. Hi, thank you all for having us. My name's Chloe Jackson. So there has been very little improvements when it does come to the repairs being made in these homes. Right now, at the city level, there's about 560 plus open city violations. Some of the things that we would like to see is that Landmark actually invest into these homes. That's not happening right now. There's tenants with broken water pipes and leaky faucets, mold, rat infestations. The list is on and on. So I know Frank said that he came out to the homes. Frank, none of the tenants have seen you before. So
I've
want
never
to come
saw
out
you.
to the homes, please come out and talk to some of these tenants.
Happy to do so.
And I can give you my address, Frank. I am the one that said I have the special needs child, and I have been a renter of Havenbrook for over 8 years. And this neighborhood that I live in, off of Dowling Avenue in North Minneapolis, it has gotten horrible. I have ex-Havenbrook to move since my son has been born. He was born at 1 pound and 4 ounces. I have had numbers of things that have went in my home wrong, and Havenbrook has done anything to fix them since the pandemic. And yes, they have been out to the home to fix some things, and I really do appreciate that. But what's going on now is that I need to move to accommodate my family for this child that I have had for 4 years in this world, and Havenbrook has took that and they just ran with it, paid it no attention. So with that being said, I have never saw you, Frank. I have seen Scott Beck. He has been out to the property, and my address, I will be willing to give you my address. My address is 3738 Girard Avenue, North Minneapolis. Come talk to me. Come meet my family. I haven't seen you, and the things that I work with Havenbrook and United Renters for Justice, I see these families, and families are being impacted very badly in these poverty-driven neighborhoods, and it's horrible. So if you're willing to meet with me, sit down, I'll even give you my telephone number. It's something that needs to be done. I'm serious. I need change for my family, and I want it for other families as well.
Well, we take comments seriously, and I will follow up with you. We certainly will follow up with Pretium, but I appreciate you. From our perspective, we don't look at you as just being our tenant. You're our partner, and to the extent that you're not pleased with where we are, and although we don't manage the properties, but we certainly are an investor, we will in fact visit with Pretium with regard to your specific situation, and I personally will stop by to visit with you.
I also appreciate what you just said. I would also like you to come to my home and visit with me and meet my kids and see the current condition of my home after the city has been here, after I've met with people and countless people come here and they do patchwork. My son has been stuck in the bathroom and had to be rescued from the Minneapolis Fire Department. I deal with many things that impact my quality of living and my kids' quality of living. So I would like to meet with you on a one-on-one basis. I would love for you to come to the house and see the current condition after they did the patchwork, maintenance stuff in the house. I would love that. And I'm on 3315 Colfax.
Governor? Yes. Directly.
Yeah, so that people aren't giving their private information over the lines. I would ask you to send your information to the State Board of Investment. You've got our, obviously you've got our contact information, and I will see to it that Mr. Borges and Mr. Mailman get the information. They're not located in town, but the sooner you send it to us, we'll get the information to them.
Director, I thank you for that. And I think it's good safety advice. I would ask, is Angela, you the organizer at Renters United?
Yeah, we can make contact and get connected because we're in these homes a lot with tenants. Tenants like Shanika and Ariana have been through the process with the city to get these repairs for months and months and months. Tenants have been reporting these repairs for a long time, and the reality is there's a lot of work to do, a lot more than 217 work orders that are probably there because tenants have not gotten responses. And so For example, there's a tenant that reported in August about rat infestations in his basement, and all Havenbrook has come out to do is to nail some of his cabinets back together, and not even done right, and that's been 3 months. So the reality is that the urgent stuff and all the fixes have been sitting for a long time, and so there really needs to be more of an investment into the tenants and into our community in North Minneapolis, that these homes are safe and dignified for all tenants.
Angela, could you, and I appreciate your work, could you help us? Mr. Borges, as he said, is not the property manager. He is at this point making a good faith effort to try and come out. We can't, I agree with Director Perry, we can't just have scatter shots on this. Is there any way to create a master listing, put that together, and to give Landmark an opportunity to see those and address those in a timely manner? It feels like, I hope you're feeling it, that there's some movement here. You've got someone listening. You've got the attention of the State Board of Investments. You've got Mr. Borges and Melman asking for a plan of how they can address these. Do you feel like that is a positive step forward? And to all of the tenants, I understand, until your issues are fixed, it's all talk. And I understand that part of it. But it feels like here there's an opportunity to really make a difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we would like to see that you all meet with the tenants. Tenants have been asking since September of 2020 to meet with Pretium and have not heard any responses. So that would be one step. And then also the city has submitted to Havenbrook all of these repairs in the form of violations and now in citations, going months and months without repair. And at the point when tenants are reporting it to the city, it's already been a long time that these repairs have been sitting. So that's definitely a place to start. And then, tenants are submitting all the time repairs into the portal and through repair requests to Havenbrook. So there's definitely lists and lists of repairs that need to be done, and then meeting with the tenants as well.
Mr. Borges, does that make sense? I'm going to turn to Secretary Simon for a question, but does that make sense? We have a little more of an organized plan, give you the opportunity, and then those folks will know.
Absolutely, Governor, and we certainly will address it immediately, as we've done in the past. It is absolutely important to us as an organization, to me personally, that the residents are living in quality, dignified homes. So it makes sense.
I think Secretary Simon, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Governor and members. And maybe in the interest of time, and so as not to interfere with the progress that's been made here, I'll just form this as a statement and not as a question. And I guess the statement is, I really hope going forward, I understand and I think we all appreciate the difference between the owner, the investor, and the property manager. And thank you for those who have made that distinction. But here's a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer it, that bears on our investment and our fiduciary duty. The question I have in my head is, how are these property managers vetted? You don't want to degrade the investment. And if you pick wrong, and if you pick a lax or negligent or uncaring property manager, that doesn't make financial sense or moral sense. So I guess the question I would have, rhetorical for our purposes only, so that we can have some further progress, is I would just urge very careful vetting of the folks who are managing the properties, so as not to degrade the investment at the very least, but more importantly, so as not to degrade the lives or the tenancy of the people living there.
If
Auditor.
And I would just back up what Secretary Simon said as well, but then also just want to ask that, so by the next meeting, I think we would expect to hear whether this meeting happened, and just making sure that, just to let everybody know that they're going to expect that we're going to follow up with this as we do our meetings with our consultants and with Mansco, with everybody, that so when these things happen, if you could also just make sure we know that they're happening as well, so we can so we don't lose this.
Mr. Martin, could you explain to me if we make this commitment? Because I think what the tenants believe here is that the leverage falls with Landmark, and they're making some progress here. what happens if we approve this now, but with what the auditor's talking about, that we come back with an expectation by the next time we meet that there needs to be this progress made? How would that work with what we're doing here? Either Director Perry or Chairman.
I might defer to Executive Director Perry on that one, if I may.
Well, one reason I asked Mr. Borges, after our last meeting, I immediately got in touch with him. I've known Mr. Borges for the last 15 years and come to respect him, take him at his word. He's former treasurer of the state of Connecticut, and in my discussions with him, he's kind of taken this stuff pretty personally. The way I've kind of looked at this is that without having the ability to contact someone, no improvements would have happened. So while I can't guarantee that if we make the investment that everything will get done immediately, I have enough faith and trust in Mr. Borges that he'll make a good faith effort to move forward. As I said, they're not local. I think their total investment in Pretium is about 3%. So it's they're a secondary investment manager. That's not a primary investment. So I can't speak for them, but as I said, I mean, the reason that I contacted him is that he's always carried through, and I've had contact with him before, and I'll just leave it at that.
No, thank you. Thank you, Director. And Angela, I would ask you, what I don't want to do is minimize the sense of urgency around your tenants, that they need this. We meet quarterly. As the director said, Landmark is not the major investor and they don't manage the properties, but they've shown that they do feel a sense of moral responsibility. And I think the secretary made a good point too. There's a fiscal responsibility. Our role as SBI board members is fiduciary responsibility, and then that intersection with the social responsibility. Would you be willing to give us the opportunity to see if we see the improvements now between now and the next SBI meeting, that this is really the time, and this will be the opportunity to show that these things are happening, and you'll be able to come back and say, we said here in December 1st, said we were going to see improvements, and I still have the same issue. Does that seem like a fair compromise? It feels to me that Mr. Borges, Mr. Melman are making a good faith effort to try and make this right. Angela, could I ask you if
can I ask a clarifying question? Are you talking about going forward with the investment and then seeing how it goes?
Yes, I think to give us an opportunity, because the one thing is too, is I think for you to recognize is to not go forward with this, then you don't have Landmark to talk to or any leverage at all if there's not an investment. So
the reality is that tenants have been living with these conditions for a long time. There has not been significant improvements since August, and it seems like you all were involved with a very small amount of the work orders in the big picture. Tenants have not seen improvements in communication. They've had people just showing up to their house to do the work, and we're still in COVID. And so they'll have people come, 3-4 different people to come take pictures of the repairs. So there is a lot of piling issues, and Pretium has not come to the table to meet and talk directly to tenants. And so we still have those same asks that tenants have been demanding for over a year. And so we would really like to see progress on that before anything moves forward.
Auditor?
Just to be clear, if we and I think that is the tension, the idea that engagement is predicated on a relationship, and we have to have a connection to stay engaged here. At the same time, voting yes today doesn't mean that we can't vote no in the future, that we can't rescind this, correct? I mean, we're not locked in for any, we can undo this vote if we don't see the progress we need, correct?
Well, no, I need to clarify that. We need to make a decision today. This is a holdover from last quarter. The fund is closing soon if it hasn't already and been held open for us. So if we pass on it today, I'm not certain what the status will be with regard to that. And I'd say that while I would still take Mr. Borges at his word, I don't think we're showing good faith as a partner in that regard. Frank, would you like to?
Yeah, the point I'd make here is that I will meet with the folks. I will meet with Pretium. We right now talk to Pretium once a week. We go over the work orders. There seems to be a little bit of a gap between with the information that we're relying on and what I'm hearing here. It seems as though there's some communication. It seems to be an agreement that repair people are coming out and perhaps they're not organized it well. So what I will do, and Paul, is we're going to talk with the Pretium repair people. We'll make sure that they administratively address whatever they need to address to make sure that the communication is there. And I will come out and visit personally. I've done that before, and I'll do it, and I'll do that again. This is very important, not only to Landmark, but it's important to me personally. This is not anything that I take lightly.
Any further comments from the board?
This is Attorney General Keith Ellison. I'll only say to the folks who are advocating for renters that the SBI is not your only route to getting an improved situation. I'll just leave it right there. And I'll also say to you that I want to thank you for your advocacy and helping people live in safe, dignified spaces. I'll also say to the folks who are helping to try to mitigate this situation that your work and your efforts are appreciated. But it sounds like there's but it sounds like there's a lot more to do. Governor, today I feel reluctant to participate in today's vote because of the role I play as a civil law enforcement person here. I don't want to mix my roles, and I feel somewhat conflicted voting at all today. So I hope I do anticipate
General, we will note for the record
recusing myself.
Yeah, a recusal, I think, if that is where you're most comfortable. I'll say before I call for a motion to vote on this, I think from the fiduciary responsibility, Chair Martin has advised this board for 3 years on private market investments. We've consistently been in the top quartile, but also with an understanding of ESG, concerns and certainly renters' concerns. I think to sever this relationship would lose all leverage involved, and the Attorney General's right. There's other means, but there would be, Mr. Borges is indicated his concern on this, but if there were no relationship, he would certainly not be doing that. And so I think this is just one of our best means, and then to continue to monitor this. And I will want to note again to the renters, the sense of urgency, your sense of frustration, and that this should have been done long ago. I don't deny any of that. I think this gives us the opportunity to put leverage to fix this. So with that, I would call for a motion to approve the recommendations on private equity with the caveat that this will be monitored as closely as we possibly can. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I now ask each member to state their vote. I would note that the Attorney General has asked for recusal because of his role as Attorney General and noted. Secretary Simon?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion is a simple majority, so it carries. The recommendations are approved, and we will continue to monitor this. I want to thank everyone involved with that. At this time, I would recognize Director Perry to address the remaining items on the agenda and hearing from members of the public who have requested to address us. Director Perry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Governor. The remaining items on the agenda are the public markets investment program, which, as I generally tell you, is some pretty good reading. It gives the pretty good sense of how our public markets program has performed over the last quarter, but there's nothing to report there. And the same can be said for the participant-directed investment non-retirement programs. We also have in addition to our reports from our consultants, we do have a new issue of our ESG report. The first item that you see there, it speaks to the stewardship report that we will be issuing when we publish the annual report. There's a chance that we might issue it beforehand if the annual report goes a little bit long because of the financial audit. But it'll also discusses the work that we're doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and some of the things that staff has supported, and also some of the engagement activities that we've done in that regard. And with that, that's all I have to report at this point. I do have another item I'd like to talk to, but I'll leave that up to the governor as to when he believes I should speak.
Thank you, Director Perry. I'd like to do that at the concluding before we call for an adjournment to have you speak at the end. At this time, the SBI has received requests from 3 groups who would like to speak at this meeting. I would ask the groups to limit your remarks to 5 minutes total. You decide how you want to split it up if there's multiple speakers. I'll call up the names of those requested, and you are recognized for your 5 minutes. First, Lisa Franchette and Emily Moore of the Minnesota Divestment Coalition. You may present your testimony at this time, and you are recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Franchette, do we have there? Ms. Moore, please, both of you, you are recognized.
Oh, I'll go. Hello, board members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Emily Moore. I'm retired from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and I'm receiving a check from my pension each month. I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Divestment Coalition. We've been talking with you over the years. We've visited with SBI staff and board members. We've introduced bills at the legislature and made a presentation at board meetings. We've been sending you monthly briefings also, as you know. We're also, what we want to tell you is we're also actively engaging with other pension holders and organizations. And I'd like to refer to a letter I believe is in your folders today, but we've also sent it to you individually. You can expect that we're going to continue to be contacting you because the climate crisis is too dire and your work is too important. As you know, the points we've stressed always have been that the top 200 fossil fuel companies are volatile, underperforming, and they're the ones that are extracting fossil fuels from the ground that climate scientists tell us have to stay in the ground, 80%. Or our habitat, and we've been talking about habitat this morning. The habitat of Minnesota is being damaged by the fossil fuels that are being burned, any carbon dioxide being emitted into the air. We believe that the prudent person standard and ESG principles compel divestment from companies that are damaging our future. We're disheartened that the June asset list has a lot of investments still in coal and oil and gas, and I can share more if you have questions. I want to say that long before joining the MPCA, I earned a master's degree in biochemistry and taught chemistry in high schools and colleges. And while teaching, I became enamored of the magic and simplicity of the natural world, how chlorophyll can trap carbon, trap the sun's energy and put it into the green plants for their growth, and how the rest of us, the animals that don't have chlorophyll, can use those the energy from those green plants. This concept helps us recognize the extraction of oil and gas over the last 150 years has put all that stored carbon into the atmosphere, and that is what is causing our climate change. I also want to tell you, I was alive during World War II, and although I was too young to understand it, I witnessed a society that responded to a real and present danger in a massive and unified way. And our elected leaders then and the private sector were able to turn the economy around on a dime to support the war effort. That same kind of commitment is absolutely essential today. And you are in a unique position to help avert this disaster by exercising your fiduciary responsibilities and divesting from the top 200 fossil fuel companies. We're expecting great work from you in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. We have a bit of time left. Do we have another speaker?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Lisa Franchette, and I moved to Minnesota in 1972. After I obtained my master's degree at the Humphrey Institute, I joined the U.S. Foreign Service, where I ended my career as a senior Foreign Service officer in 2019. And I left that career to become an environmental activist here in the U.S. because I realized that no amount of U.S. foreign assistance could make up for the harm caused to the developing world by our country's CO2 emissions. I'll cite just one example. In West Africa, farmers are struggling to grow crops because the growing season has been shortened by several weeks due to climate change. I have a lot of respect for the work the SBI staff does managing Minnesota's pension fund. Pensions provide public sector employees greater financial security in retirement and must be carefully managed. I want to make clear that the Minnesota Divestment Coalition is not asking the board to jeopardize Minnesota's pensions. In fact, there is ample evidence to show that pensions and endowments can make stellar returns while divesting from fossil fuels. Over 6 months ago, the SBI agreed to undertake a financial risk assessment related to climate change. We didn't hear any updates regarding that assessment at the last quarter's board meeting or at this one. The Minnesota Divestment Coalition would like to see the results of the risk assessment. And we believe a full set of recommendations should be presented to the SBI no later than the middle of 2022 so that it can take expeditious action towards divestment. We'd also like the SBI to increase transparency around any steps the SBI is taking to divest from coal and other fossil fuels. We applaud the decision of the SBI to divest from coal, and the SBI board and public should receive regular reports on how progress towards this commitment is progressing. I joined the Minnesota Divestment Coalition out of a conviction that investment decisions have an impact on our climate and our future. When a large institution divests from a fossil fuel company, it lowers the company's share price, which makes it more difficult for the fossil fuel company to access the investment capital needed to exploit fossil fuel resources. This is important because scientists estimate that we can only burn 20% of existing fossil fuel reserves and still remain below a 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase. In addition, divestment by large institutions creates a stigma for fossil fuel companies, which can impact their ability to recruit top talent at competitive prices. Finally, the growing recognition that fossil fuel resources must remain in the ground could lead to a devaluation of these resources and potentially stranded assets. Thus, for both financial and ethical reasons, we urge the SBI to divest from the top 200 fossil fuel companies. Governor Walz, I commend you and the PCA for having adopted the clean car standards this year in the face of very fierce opposition. And you mustn't stop there. I urge you and the SBI board to use every tool at your disposal to positively impact the climate crisis. Divesting Minnesota's pension fund from fossil fuel companies is one of those tools. COP26 discussions made clear that the time remaining for us to turn the climate ship around is running out. The livelihoods of Minnesotans are being negatively impacted by climate change. Last year, the Trout Fishing Association, Minnesota Logging Association, and Southern Minnesotan farmers provided compelling testimony to the Minnesota legislature about how climate change is undermining their livelihoods. As senior state leaders, the SBI needs to consider what levers it can use to protect our state's environment and economy while carrying out its fiduciary responsibilities. Harvard University trustees, the Ford Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, elected officials in Maine and New York State have similar fiduciary responsibilities for managing their institutions' resources. Yet, all of these institutions have identified ways to generate sound returns while divesting from fossil fuel companies. We are asking you, the SBI board, to be courageous and to do the same for the sake of our children and future generations. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Franchette. Thank you, Ms. Moore. Director Perry, I think I'll have you hold any comments or response to some of the questions till we hear from our next speaker. Our next speaker is Megan Dayton, President of the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees. At this time, President Dayton, you may present for 5 minutes. You are recognized.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Good morning to you and to members of the board. Thank you for the time to address this body today. I am Megan Dayton. I'm the statewide president for the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, or MAPE. We represent over 15,000 professional employees that work throughout the executive branch of state government. I'm also a senior demographer for our State Demographic Center. And while I'm here today specifically wearing my MAPE hat, the demographic implications of decisions around investment of public pension dollars are astounding. I'm encouraged by the efforts of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. For now, though, back to MAPE. In 2016 and 2017, MAPE's Delegate Assembly passed resolutions supporting efforts to encourage this board's divestment from fossil fuels. I think this is important to bring to your attention. MAPE represents many of the employees who have so much at stake when you make decisions. So if you take nothing else away from what I say today, I want you to know that the people with so much at stake support divestment from fossil fuels. The total investment in coal, oil, and gas is about $1.4 billion, and that's a little over 1% of the most recent value for the total portfolio. Minnesota's pension holders are asking the state to restructure investments in its pension funds, moving money out of the fossil fuel industry and reinvesting in areas like renewable energy. We feel it's important to take away the funding and the means to continue destroying our planet. As I understand this body's opposition to divestment cites concerns about financial risks of divestment. However, I argue the opposite as reality, and I challenge this perspective with data about growth in renewable energy stocks and the increasingly poor performance and volatility of fossil fuel investments. We've talked about this throughout the day today. This body has a fiduciary responsibility to divest before we're faced with stranded assets. I applaud your recent divestment from thermal coal. And while this is a step in the right direction, our members are clear that it's not enough to secure a safe future for Minnesotans, and that is financially or environmentally. I want to emphasize the urgency of taking swift and decisive action to divest from fossil fuels. COP26 made clear there's no time to waste in divesting from fossil fuels. Also, as president, I like to keep our members as informed as possible as you take action. So if there is someone at the SBI that MAPE can dialogue with in order to understand and monitor these divestment efforts, please do let me know. Thank you for your time this morning. I yield back.
Thank you, President Dayton, and thank you to members of Minnesota Divestment Coalition for your continued advocacy on climate change. It's self-apparent that climate change is upon us, and the existential threat that it brings is here. You could see it in the wildfires and the smoke. You could see it in our unusual flooding and weather events that at one time were considered century or 500-year events are now almost yearly occurrences. The commitment to moving Minnesota towards a clean energy future has been a top priority of our administration. I will not speak for other members of the board here, but they have publicly expressed much the same. Director Perry has been, as you said, to President Dayton, on moving on thermal coal, of trying to move in a direction that gets Minnesota towards that sustainable future. The State Board of Investments is one piece of that. A plan has been put in place. I think the questions from Ms. Franchette were just to make sure that the public understands where those are at, understands where the plan is at, and understand what the timeline looks at. So, so we're grateful for that advocacy. I am also appreciative of the noting of the movement towards clean cars, reduces 8.4 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere over the next 10 years, but also accelerates economic growth. We heard it on our recent trade mission to Europe. Between the UK and Finland, every single private entity that we work with or university has no interest in working with states who are not moving towards a clean energy future. So investments in the state and long-term sustainability of our state finances is going to be predicated on this. So I'm grateful for that. Director Perry, I don't know if there's anything in where we're at or any of the specific questions about where our plan is at and when that will be, or if it is available to the public. So I will turn to Director Perry.
Yes. So I appreciate what everyone's had to say. I'd like to note, even though I don't necessarily agree that straight divesting is a responsible investment approach, I do believe that climate change is probably the most important investment issue that we're going to face over the next 3 decades. When I did my management and budget report, I proposed that we engage our consultant, Makita, to take a similar look that has been taken in other places, particularly New York State, and do a climate risk assessment. I also specifically pointed out that in order for us to do this, that we would have to accelerate their contract, but go through the process to see if they were going to be our consultant again. We have done that. We did it at an accelerated pace. We had to renegotiate a contract because of the effort that it would take to do such a study would not have been possible under our prior contract. The contract has been negotiated. It's been signed. It takes place January 1. I'm going to ask our head consultant, Alan Imkin of Makita, to give you a brief overview of where we are. But initially, when we stated that we'd do this, we believed that it would be about a year-long project in order for us to finish it. So I understand everyone's eager to get results. I think we've been very transparent in what we do. I think that's a hallmark of what the staff is focused on here. But these things are not done overnight. Personally, the reason I believe we needed to have a risk assessment so that you didn't have investment jockeys who only believe in ROI doing this, because we're not scientists. But I do believe that the resources that are available to Mr. Imkin and Makita have proven in the past to be able to come up with something that can give the staff and the board some comfort in that the steps that we will take in trying to address this issue are thought out, not kind of seat of the pants, not kind of like, well, this is the popular thing to do today. And so I think that this is probably the most important thing that we can do. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Imkin if he can give a very brief assessment of where we are and see if there's a timeline to which we can give to give people some notice that, yeah, we will be transparent when we have something, but we're not pulling a rabbit out of the hat today.
Mr. Governor, would it be appropriate for me to comment at this point?
Yes, you are recognized, Mr. Emkin.
Thank you, Mr. Governor, members. As always, a pleasure. We didn't wait for the contract to become effective. The urgency of this issue and the concern from many different perspectives necessitated us starting the work. So we fully engaged in the analysis and drafting of the first of 3 phases in September. And in fact, a rough draft has already been provided to the staff. A series of surveys and analyses are heavily invested at this point, and we plan at your next meeting to present you with the first of 3 reports to assist you in your consideration of how best to address this matter.
No, thank you, Mr. Emkin. And again, to President Dayton and to members of the coalition, we feel your sense of urgency. The process is moving. We need to continue to make progress. And I think your position of it's never fast enough is appropriate. And we hear that. And any questions or comments from members of the board? We have one final public speaker. Hearing none, I would turn and recognize Evelyn Zepeda and Martha Conejo of the Western States Regional Joint Board. You may present at this time, and if the 2 of you are on, you have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Please go ahead, Ms. Zepeda.
Great. Good morning, Minnesota State Board of Investment members, and Governor Tim Walz, the State Auditor, Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. I won't go into names, trying to save my time. Thank you for your time. I'm Evelyn Cepeda. I'm Deputy Manager and Union Representative from the Western States Regional Joint Board of Workers United, which is an SCIU affiliate. Our union represents healthcare laundry workers, mostly Latinx immigrant women who keep hospitals safe by washing soiled bed sheets, gowns, towels, and more. We are bringing our story to your attention because the MSBI is a limited partner of BlackRock Private Equity Partners Incorporated, which was a funder for the purchase of Angelica Corporation by Pacific Avenue Capital Partners portfolio company, Emerald Textiles. We are speaking to the board today on behalf of 1,000 healthcare laundry workers employed by the facilities being purchased by Emerald Textiles in California and Arizona. As you all know, investors are increasingly recognizing the role of workforce and human capital management issues for the long-term success of investments. The workforce issues we raise here are firmly embedded in the fiduciary duty of both the MSBI and BlackRock to manage risk on behalf of the pension plan participants on whose behalf both entities invest to ensure the retirement security of plan participants. I know some of you have received information from the recent NLRB or National Labor Relations Board settlement with Emerald. We want to clarify that the recent settlement is a completely separate issue from the purchase of Angelica Corporation, and that there is still an active labor board charge filed against Emerald on the purchase of Angelica. For months, Emerald has not responded to any of our requests to negotiate a smooth transition. Until last week, Emerald had refused to meet, and hundreds of workers feared they would lose their job. We understand that the MSBI began looking into this matter after receiving a letter from our members. We appreciate the fund's due diligence efforts and are glad to report that there have been positive developments since we first communicated with you. And we believe that your efforts help move the process forward. Last Wednesday, November 24th, Emerald finally agreed to begin negotiating over all 8 of the healthcare laundry facilities it's purchasing, and negotiations began yesterday. While this is a step in the right direction, there is much work to be done to bring this to a final successful outcome for all the stakeholders. At this time, Emerald has still not committed to retaining the current workers, and they have proposed eliminating the workers' pension benefits. To speak more about what it could mean to lose their pensions, I'd like to turn this over to one of our members, Marta Conejo. You ready, Martha?
Martha? Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, Mama.
Good morning. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Marta Conejo, and I work for Angelica in Pittsburgh, California. My concern about now is about my union contract with me and all of my co-workers. I've been worried all this time because I'm 62 years old mom. I'm single mom with my special needs son, and I very worried about my pension, and I worry about all my co-workers. In September, Angelica sold the company to Emmer. So at that time, everybody's worried about the jobs, about the pensions, about everything. Everybody worked with the COVID-19. Nobody quit. Everybody stayed working hard for Angelica. And I want to know something about to us because I worry about everybody at Angelica. And I really frustration, freak out. If I lose my job, I don't know what to do. Please, I need your help to Emerald sign my new fair contract to all my co-workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Conejo. Thank you, Ms. Zepeda. At this time, I would, I don't know if Director Perry, I do know, and Attorney General, I know you're very familiar with this, and it falls into a bit of your other hat, if you will. So I'm not sure if you would have any comments or turn to Director Perry. I'll turn to you, Attorney General.
You know, Governor, I do want to praise these workers for bringing these matters forward. I want to thank them for standing up for their colleagues who they work together with. As you noted earlier, Governor, ESG is a part of what it means to be a good fiduciary. And so we are listening and we are using the role that we have to try to advance not just a stable retirement for the working people, no, for the pension holders, but also a just outcome. These things are not easy to always balance, but we're endeavoring to do it to the best of our ability. Because this matter is not squarely, I mean, this matter is, I feel more comfortable voting in this one because the other matter had to do with something squarely and directly under my supervisory authority as a AG. This one is a little bit more spread out, and so I will be participating. But I do want to just note that and just indicate to our executive director and others that these matters are extremely important to me. I expect that we're going to work on these things very carefully. I have heard that there was progress being made, but I also heard that I'm also hearing that maybe not as much as we expect. So I'll leave it right there. But I will just say that as one member, I intend to continuously urge SBI to balance these important equities with regard to the pensioners, but also to the issues of environment and social and governance and things like that.
No, thank you, Attorney General. Today we don't actually have to have a vote on this one, but I think the engagement is here. And it so works out, Mr. Emkin may also have some expertise in this area. I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Emkin, but if you could help us understand BlackRock's engagement to the concerns that are expressed here.
Thank you, Mr. Governor, and it's my pleasure. We were informed about this issue less than 10 days ago, and we immediately reached out to both parties to the union, who I have a long-standing relationship with their capital stewardship program, and to BlackRock. Both parties have been forthcoming. To be fair to the union, the BlackRock people, this was not high on their agenda, but it is now. And they have informed all parties that they care about this issue. We will continue to monitor the issue and bring it back to your staff and to the board if that's necessary. And as the members of the union know, they have my phone number, both personal and professional, and they can call us at any time to get updates upon the status from our opinion. But we will continue to monitor and ensure that your concerns are reflected to BlackRock.
Thank you, Mr. Emkin. And I would note, Ms. Cepeda, in thanking you and Ms. Conejo for being here today. While there's no vote, you have elevated this to a public meeting. It is very clear, and as the Attorney General indicated, this is critically important to us. We need to make sure that every worker gets a fair shake in this. We know there's been some agreement with the Teamsters, but as you're expressing, we can't leave anyone out on this. Mr. Emkin, I think, stated it fairly and very candidly that 10 days ago they didn't know about this. It wasn't an issue. It's an issue today. So we hear you. We'll continue to monitor. There's no action that needs to be taken. And Director Perry, I don't know if there's anything you need to add on this.
Yes, I would like to point out that none of the BlackRock funds in which the SBI holds an interest participated in the Emerald or Angelica deals. The SBI has no investments with BlackRock Private Equity Partners, which is a separate subsidiary under the BlackRock umbrella. But we did contact BlackRock, whom we've got pretty good relationships with, and we're happy that in addition to Mr. Emkin's efforts that they did listen to us. What we've heard back is that Emerald they've been in negotiations with Emerald and either have reached or are close to reaching some settlement with some of these issues. But should be noted that we do have limited information available to us because we aren't invested in the fund that holds an interest in this, and that's a little problematic for staff.
Yeah, thank you, Director. And I think it's clear there that while we don't have a direct fiduciary responsibility, we do have a moral responsibility. So I congratulate you, Ms. Cepeda and Workers United for advocating for your members in a creative manner that is turning over every stone. So we hear you loud and clear on that. At this time, I reluctantly recognize Director Perry for an announcement, and I turn it to you, Director Perry, for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you, and as usual, I'll try to be brief. I just want to formally communicate to the board that I plan to retire from the SBI during calendar year 2022.
Well, Director, true to form, you made your announcement. The implications of that, though, and on behalf of Minnesota's employees, retirees, in full disclosure, one myself as a teacher, and to the taxpayers, I want to thank you for extraordinary service. I have mentioned to people since I have had the privilege of becoming governor, maybe the most important person in the state of Minnesota that a lot of people haven't heard about is Mansco Perry and the work that you've done. And you've never pounded your chest about things, but when I tell people our pension funds are as strong as any in the nation, any other state, our returns outpace the private sector time and time again. The team that you've assembled are true professionals, and they serve this state and the pensioners of this state with great dignity. So I for one want to personally thank you. If this is the right decision for you, then we're happy for you. But I can tell you that the people of Minnesota will be losing an incredible public servant who has done them well and served many administrations here. So Director, you have my thanks. To other members of the board, I would recognize you. Secretary of State Simon, and then Auditor Blaha and Attorney General.
Thank you. I too want to add my comments and my note of thanks to Director Perry. If there were a Mount Rushmore for public employee retirement security, Mansco Perry would be on it. Anyone can have a hot month, anyone can have a hot quarter, or even a hot year. But over the long haul, both in his current role and in other roles with the SBI before he assumed this role, you can see the numbers don't lie. In your own presentation, Director Perry, earlier on, you noted that the 5-year number, all 5 of those years, of course, you were in charge, we are in the 95th percentile. We're ahead of 95% of our peers. So that is more than just good fortune or good luck or coincidence or accident. That is leadership from you and your team, of course, but you bear, you own a huge part of that success. So thank you, not just from me, from everyone in Minnesota whose retirement depends on your good judgment and your good decisions. I know we'll have some more to say in a moment about the process of finding your, I won't say replacement, I will say successor, because there is no replacing you, but I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Auditor Blaha.
Oh, yeah, I echo both what the governor and the Secretary of State says, and I'm likely what the Attorney General is going to say. But I was on a call last night with treasurers, state treasurers across the country, and every time they would bring something up, it's like, wow, I wonder what the comparisons are. I said, oh, I know, we're number one. Or, but it wasn't just on the returns that we could brag and that we could be so proud of what we did. But when those treasurers brought up, wow, we'd like to do something with ESG, it's like, oh, hey, we're already doing that. Or, does anybody understand how to manage this new approach? It's like, oh, we're doing that. And if people understand just how effective we are with this incredibly lean, let's say, structure, it's really even more impressive when you realize just how small the team is, frankly, relative to what the returns and what their efforts are. And also just what's been so helpful to us too, is as we are navigating difficult issues and important issues, particularly around ESG, instead of trying to dissuade us from taking action, you are holding us accountable to do it right in a way that's going to last and have lasting effect beyond your tenure, beyond all of our tenures, and forcing us to do the hard work to make it actually work, to make it right. And that is just really unique and really impressive. And it's going to be a tremendous loss for the state, not just for this fund, but for the larger discussion about how to do good in government. So again, I don't think we can thank you enough.
Thank you, Auditor. Attorney General.
Governor, I just want to say that when I came to the job of the Attorney General, I have to confess to you that I was not quite aware as how much I'd have to be involved in stuff that doesn't involve leading a public law office. One of those jobs is sitting on the SBI. But I can say that at all times, Mansco Perry has been ready to help bring his perspective, to teach, to share information, even be a good sport when we have to argue sometimes. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Mansco Perry. I mean, I think that it has been one of the highlights of my service to be able to work with you, talk about the economy, engage with you around issues of ESG, appreciate how, you are a very prudent leader, but you also understand that the SBI board, all of us have other considerations we have to pay attention to. So, to you and all your staff, you will be very, very much missed. Nobody can really fill your shoes. We have to talk about your successor, not your replacement, because I don't know how anybody's going to do that. But it's been great to get to know you, and I'm sure we'll continue to work and see each other. But thank you for your service, sir.
Director, there's so much to be said on this, and I agree. And I think the Attorney General's right of your patience of teaching all of us what needed to be done on this to become the best experts we could on something that is this critically important, managing a $140 billion future of tens of thousands of Minnesotans and doing it in a responsible manner. Everything that's been said here is true. It's rare you get to hear your own eulogy, but you are going on to other things. And I think the public needs to note on this, a person of Mr. Perry's expertise and track record is so incredibly rare that the private sector really doesn't have a top on what they would do. Director Perry chose to serve state government. He chose to serve his neighbors. And above all else, for that, I'm incredibly grateful. So, Director Perry, we're still with you for a while here, but it moves me to my next order of business. And if the public's listening, this is that we're finding this week and moving accordingly. And I would like to thank Secretary Simon and his team for putting some thought into what a successor looks like and how do you find that person. So with Director Perry's imminent retirement, we have before us a resolution authorizing the establishment of a search committee to retain a search firm, vet applicants, and make recommendations to the board. Are there any comments on this? I think all of you have received that. It was a recent addition to the materials, but Secretary Simon and their team's work, I think, puts this together very solidly. Any comments before I ask for a motion to vote on this? Secretary, please.
Yeah, I just want to give credit where it's due. Thank you for mentioning our office, Governor, but BB Black in our office, who is typically my and our designee, did really great work on this, and in part because she's just good at it, in part because she is, I believe, the only one on this call among the principals or designees that was part of the last search that brought us Mansco Perry. And so she has some insight into what that process looked like. Not necessarily that that's the be all and end all and the way we have to do it, but at least a little bit perspective. So I want to just call her out for her efforts on short notice.
Well, thank you for noting that. That institutional knowledge that BB has is it's apparent. This is a great proposal. I'll be supporting it. If there's no further comments, I'd ask for a motion on the proposed resolution.
So moved.
At this time, I'd ask for members to state their votes. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The resolution is adopted, and we'll get moving now. Any further discussion before I ask for a motion to adjourn the State Board of Investments? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
I'll call roll call vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. This meeting of the State Board of Investments is adjourned. Secretary Simon, we say goodbye to you. At this time, I now call the meeting of the Land Exchange Board to order. As chair of the Land Exchange Board, I've determined that an in-person meeting was not practical or prudent due to our COVID-19 health pandemic, as is permitted under Minnesota Statutes Chapter 12 and under the open meeting law. In these conditions, this meeting of the Land Exchange Board is being conducted virtually, and all votes will be counted by roll call. I thank the folks who showed great patience as we move through these meetings. They take on a life of their own because the public needs to be heard, and the same will be heard with the Land Exchange Board. I would now first order of business call for a motion to approve the minutes of the August 25th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
I now ask roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. I'm now recognizing DNR Assistant Commissioner Jess Richards to present a request for approval of the DNR's acquisition of an 80-acre parcel of land to be used for an expansion of the Baxter Wildlife Management Area. After Assistant Commissioner Richards introduces the request and answers any questions from the board, I'll be recognizing the current landowner and a representative of Lackapaul County to present testimony if they desired, followed by other interested parties to request on this land transfer. Assistant Commissioner Richards, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning. I guess we're still morning. Good morning, Land Exchange Board members. I'm here on behalf of the Commissioner and the DNR to request that the Land Exchange Board approve the DNR's acquisition of an 80-acre parcel in Lackapaul County for an addition to the Baxter Wildlife Management Area. You should have a packet in front of you titled Minnesota DNR Request for Approval of Fee Title Acquisition in Lackapaul County. And then you can see there's in Exhibit A there's some maps of the location that we're talking about. So today you have a real unique request before you, and it's the first time that the DNR has sought Land Exchange Board approval of a land acquisition. Typically, DNR land acquisitions do not become before the board, and they're just decided within the DNR, but there's some unique circumstances here that have led us here in accordance with state law. You'll see a number of different statutory citations throughout your packet. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but just recognizing that there's statutes that apply here. As you know, DNR is committed to continually improving Minnesota's land base, both in order to protect natural resources, but also to provide for public access to state lands for hunting and other recreational purposes. And we're also committed to providing, transparent and effective communication with counties and other local government partners to understand and address their needs surrounding land acquisition. We've actually taken great effort over the last several years to improve our relationships with county governments, particularly in the area of land acquisition and sale of surplus state lands. Our land acquisitions at the DNR are strategic. We focus them to maximize the conservation benefits. And in most cases, we're able to successfully balance those conservation goals with the needs of the counties. Unfortunately, in this particular acquisition project, there are some differences that couldn't be resolved between the DNR, the landowner, and the county. And state law then requires the Land Exchange Board to determine whether or not the DNR acquisition of this land is in the public interest. I'll give you a little more specific definition about that later on. So just a little bit about the parcel in question here. It's in Baxter Township in Lackaparle County. It's owned by Joe's Family Farm, LLC. The owner of that company is Philip Sonstegard, who is participating in the hearing today. The parcel is adjacent to the existing Baxter Wildlife Management Area, and it's in close proximity to other protected lands such as the Lackaparle Wildlife Management Area, the Lackaparle State Park, and then several conservation easements that were Reinvest in Minnesota investments. It's 80 acres, consisting of about 59 acres of row crop, 18.5 acres of wetland. There's a couple right-of-way accesses and a half-acre radio tower site there. It's considered marginal farmland. It's susceptible to flooding and wet conditions, and crop production is significantly below the average for the area. Mr. Sonstegard can talk about this, but he has indicated to us that this land is more difficult to manage than any other of his farmlands that he owns and operates. The addition of this parcel to the Baxter Wildlife Management Area, though, would protect existing wetlands. It would establish perennial upland cover for habitat for grassland birds and pollinators. It would help us improve the overall habitat complex, which is really critical to maintaining wildlife populations, is to have that complex and network of lands. It would also be managed to help improve surface and groundwater quality in the area by improving soil stabilization and infiltration. I'll give you a quick rundown of some procedural history. In the fall of 2018, the DNR and Mr. Sonstegard entered into a purchase agreement for DNR to purchase the property. And under state law, the DNR needs to seek county board approval for the acquisition of lands for a wildlife management area. So in February of 2019, we sought that approval and the county board disapproved the acquisition. As is provided in law, Mr. Sonstegard appealed this decision to the Lackaparle County District Court. And the district court ruled that the county board's denial of the acquisition was invalid. And that court order is in Exhibit B in your packet. That's my understanding. Also, there's a county board representative that would like to speak, as you referenced as well, Governor. So now, just quickly, under Minnesota Statute 97A.145, Subdivision 2, the commissioner or the landowner may bring this acquisition request to the board for approval. And specifically what it says is the board must consider the interests of the county, the state, and the landowner in determining whether the acquisition is in the public interest. If the majority of the Land Exchange Board approves the acquisition, DNR can proceed. And of course, if you do not approve, then we cannot. So just a couple other comments here, and then I'll wrap up about the reasons why DNR believes this acquisition is in the public interest. I mentioned earlier the benefits to wildlife and water quality that would be gained. It would help further that wildlife complex. It'd be great for birds and pollinators and groundwater and surface water quality. In addition to those benefits, it's really important to recognize that this acquisition aligns with multiple statutory obligations the DNR has for acquiring land for natural resource protection and public access. This acquisition is also part of an approved Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council project to restore more lands for wildlife management areas. And, I want to also note that the acquisition of this parcel should not negatively impact the county or local government revenues in the area, because the loss of taxes in this case would be offset by the payment in lieu of taxes program. And it's my understanding that the payment in lieu of taxes payments would exceed the tax revenues that would be generated from private ownership here. And then finally, I would just note that it's important to recognize the rights of Mr. Sonstegard as a private landowner. I mean, he has the right to sell his property, and he has expended significant time and resources in trying to do so. And so for all of these reasons, the DNR respectfully requests that the Land Exchange Board determine that this proposed acquisition in Lackawanna County is in the public interest and approve the acquisition. And Governor, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. At this time, I would ask if any of the board members have questions. We are going to hear from the other interested parties immediately after this. But if there's any questions now, please. Attorney General, you're recognized.
Governor, all I want to say is to everyone listening, we've had an opportunity to get briefed. We are going to get more information in a few minutes, which is important. But sometimes we zip through these meetings and it looks like, we're just taking a position off the cuff. We're really not. We work really hard before the meeting to come to conclusions. And I know that that's already been stated, but I know on this one that there are folks who have different points of view on it. And I just want to assure them that all of us have had ample opportunity to get a chance to look at both sides of this question. And I yield back.
No, thank you. I just appreciate you noting so, Attorney General. The staff work incredibly hard to make sure that we are as briefed as we can be. Hearing no more further questions at this time, I will turn and recognize Mr. Philip Sonstegard, the landowner in this proposed transfer. You may present, Mr. Sonstegard, and you're recognized for up to 15 minutes if you need it.
Go ahead. Okay, you're good. Thank you very much, Governor. I'm Philip Sonstegard, owner and chief manager of this property. I'd like to thank the Land Exchange Board, Governor Tim Walz, State Auditor Julie Baja, and Attorney General Keith Ellison for allowing me this time to speak to you on this specific issue, which I have a lot of personal feelings concerning. I'm certain we all believe in the primary tenets of land ownership. It's what has made our country great. With much gratitude to our founders, the federal constitution, the state statutes, and county rule. Highest and best use of the standard that we operate under, and I think we all agree to, is I believe that landowners ought to have and be allowed to transfer their property when it meets the 4 basic criteria of this standard. For clarity, those standards are: it must be legally permissible. It must be physically possible. It must be financially feasible. And it should maximize the productivity of the property according to the plan of the next owner. Every reasonable person would agree that these standards have been met, as the next owner has established that all of these items are exceeded beyond doubt. The facts are undisputable, the law is undisputable, and my desire is to sell this property to the state is unquestionable. I thank you for your time. I appreciate all your efforts and your consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sonstegard. I would ask you, I know we've kept you a long time this morning, but if you could just hold, I think we'll go through our other speakers, and then if there's any questions we need to go through. At this time, I'd like to recognize Lackawanna County Commissioner Todd Patzer. I would also note and congratulate Mr. Patzer will be the incoming president of Minnesota Counties. Incredibly important organization, a voice that needs to, that we look to hear from. With that, Mr. Patzer, I would recognize you for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison, and Auditor Blaha. My name is Todd Patzer. I'm a Lackawanna County Commissioner, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of the people of Lackawanna County. Lackawanna County is situated on the western border of Minnesota, straight west of St. Paul. We have a very small but very civic-minded and very engaged population, which routinely turns out to vote at over a 90% rate. We want our voices to be heard by our elected leaders, which is my goal today as I explain the decision of our county board to disapprove the acquisition by the DNR of the parcel in question before you today. It's my hope that after considering the testimony of the stakeholders today, that you will uphold our decision to disapprove this acquisition. I'd offer a little bit of background. Lac Powell County is an agricultural community. There's no question about that. It does not mean that we farm every acre we can. The number one and number two landowners in our county have long been the Minnesota DNR and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Currently, about 40,000 acres of land in Lac Powell County is owned by the state and federal governments. And this does not include thousands of additional acres that are subject to restrictive and permanent conservation easements. Public lands and conservation are nothing new to us. We value them. We understand the need for them, and we support them. 15 years ago, if you consider both public ownership of lands combined with conservation practices in place on tens of thousands of acres of private lands through programs such as CRP, CREP, RIM, WRPs, and more, nearly 15% of our acres were dedicated to conservation practices. Since then, we've experienced a couple of significant run-ups in commodity prices, and there was concern that these conservation efforts would be lost to row crop agriculture. But as we meet today, these fears have proven unfounded, as we still see 15% of our acres, nearly 75,000 of them, dedicated to conservation practices. This is far more than other counties in Southwest Minnesota. The citizens of Lac Powell County understand the value of conservation, and we are doing our share and then some. A little bit about ag land and our local economy. Ag land is the dominant driver of our local economy. The total inputs invested into each acre of farmland, as well as the revenues derived from that land, can reach beyond $1,000 per acre. That's before accounting for the exponential effect of those dollars being spent and respent in the county's communities and around the state. The commerce generated by agricultural production sustains innumerable local businesses, both directly and indirectly. Not only a source of family income for the county's farmers, the ag economy dollars then flow through the owners and employees of implement dealerships, grocery stores, banks, insurance agencies, pharmacies, and auto dealerships. Moreover, our non-agricultural families need local service providers such as electricians, carpenters, plumbers, mechanics, and welders, many of which would not have a feasible business model without the ag sector. Schools and hospitals, our largest single employers providing access to critical services, rely on a strong ag economy to survive. The DNR has stated in our meetings that these types of acquisitions will diversify and improve our local economy by attracting more people and visitors to the area. In reality, it's quite the opposite when a parcel is tied up for a singular purpose, essentially forever, with no flexibility of use. While we welcome hunters and visitors to the area with open arms and encourage them to use and enjoy our vast tracts of public lands and recreational areas, there is just no math to support the claim that an acre of public recreation land has even a tiny fraction of the economic impact that an acre of farmland can generate in our community. Hunters and visitors are valued and welcomed by our businesses. But with the exception of a guide service or two, there's not a single business in Lac Powell that is solely sustained by hunting or tourism, while nearly every business is dependent on the ag economy. A little bit about what is good farmland. The DNR has claimed at our meetings and in the information submitted to you for this hearing that the proposed piece of farmland is marginal. That's a subjective term and is impacted by dozens of variables. Farming is a complicated business, and the management practices and decisions made will impact the outcome. Every farmer farms acres that are less than ideal farmland, and these acres are an important piece of the ag production landscape. And just because they are not perfect does not suggest they should not be farmed. The data provided to you by the DNR for this meeting indicates that this parcel was recently capable of producing nearly 180 bushel per acre corn yields. That's not a marginal result. The DNR also indicates that recent wet springs forced changes in planting intentions. The conditions in the spring of 2018 and 2019 forced the exact same changes on thousands upon thousands of acres in Lac Powell County and nearly every other ag county in Minnesota and other states as well. The county board finds this argument to be invalid. Farmland is in demand, and if he wanted to, Mr. Sonstegard could rent or sell this property to a private owner or farmer. And if the DNR's offered purchase price is substantially above the local market, perhaps we should be asking why. The argument that this land is useless for farming and the owner is just trying to divest of unusable land does not hold up. Additionally, agriculture is constantly changing and adapting. Wind and solar farms are cropping up across the landscape as potential development uses for land that may not be seen as ideal for row crop agriculture. Acres seen as unusable for farming or other development a generation ago are seen differently now, and will surely be seen differently in the future than they are now. A little bit about what we hear from our citizens. If you Google Lackaparra County and DNR, it's easy to find media coverage criticizing our county board's denial of this acquisition. When you only take a superficial view of the matter, it seems obvious. Who doesn't want more public recreation areas? They see undeveloped land as untapped potential for public good. I'm asking you to look closer at how this actually impacts the people who live here. The DNR has stated that the people want more public lands. I'm not able to refute that on any grand scale, but I can tell you for sure what I hear from the people of our county. We have discussed this or similar situations in a public setting on numerous occasions. We have had people in attendance and have received many calls. Local support for these types of transactions is mostly limited to current and former DNR staff, those who stand to gain financially from the transaction in question, and a few local supporters. The overwhelming majority of calls and feedback I get from people are opposed to more public lands in Lackaparra, and I do not think this is specific to Lackaparra. How this fits into a bigger picture. Since the passage of the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment in 2008, we have seen a marked uptick in private lands being sold to the state or federal governments, or severely restricted through permanent easements. We have seen this happen on farmland and non-farmed acres alike. We have seen this on lands deemed marginal for farming. We've seen it on lands seen as highly productive. We've seen it through fee title acquisition, through purchase of easement, and we have seen outside singularly focused conservation groups such as Ducks Unlimited and Pheasants Forever, who thanks to the amendment suddenly have deep, deep pockets, swoop in and buy land at locally eyebrow-raising exorbitant prices, and then turn around and gift the land to the DNR or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Just this week, I was contacted by yet another local small family farmer who's having 80 acres of farmland that he wants to keep farming to provide for his family, pulled from beneath him by Pheasants Forever, targeting and enticing an absentee landowner with a hefty offer to purchase. When he asked if he could just buy the farmed acres, he was told, "We'll see how much of the stink the Lackaparra board puts up before we decide that." Is that partnership and cooperation? So we recognize that all of our concerns are not specific to just this property we meet about today, but rather a piece of a larger concerning trend. On the whole, and when combined, these transactions push us towards a tipping point. Often, when a piece of land is sold or restricted, a large sum of money is sent to someone far away, and we are left with diminished rights and options, and gone forever is the ability for a small family farmer to make his or her living on that piece of land. We cannot slowly become just a place of recreation and conservation, a place to be visited and enjoyed a few nice Saturdays each fall. We need to also be a place for people to live and work and raise their families. As you are well aware, a judge in Lackaparra County has recently ruled that the county's reasons for disapproving of the purchase were arbitrary and capricious. While I certainly don't agree with that ruling, there's no doubt that it stands. It is my hope that after hearing from the people of our county through my message here, that you will not think that we acted flippantly or irresponsibly, or that we were arbitrary in our actions. I do, however, agree with the judge when he writes in his ruling that his judgment does not in any way constitute approval of the sale to the DNR. He correctly and clearly points out that that is your job as the Land Exchange Board. When local DNR staff presented this to our board, they offered their interpretation of the law, which was essentially that we had no choice but to approve the sale, that we were bound by law to only consider what the state wants, and therefore had no grounds for denial. Do you think this statute intended to give DNR employees, none of whom were elected into their job, unilateral authority for determining what serves as the immeasurably broad definition of public interest? We believe the legislature involved the county board in the process for a reason. Regardless, this issue is no longer in the control of the Lackaparra County Board. Per statute, the Land Exchange Board must consider the interests of the county, the state, and the landowner in determining whether the acquisition is in the public interest. The statute does not give you any criteria for making that determination, but if the public includes the general citizens of Lackawanna County, I refer you back to the board's well thought out list of reasons for denial. There's become a sense in the most rural parts of Minnesota that our elected statewide leaders don't hear us or worry much about what we think. After all, there are not that many of us in the grand scheme of things. Lots of livestock and landscape, but not many people. Personally, I don't believe that. I think they do hear us when we speak up. And today you have a chance to send that message as well. If not now and for these reasons, then when and for what reasons would there ever be justification for a county board denial of the DNR land acquisition? As the saying goes, when nothing changes, then nothing changes. You think this topic needs further conversation and thought? You have the power to be the catalyst for that here today. And I hope that you will uphold the decision of the county board and not allow this purchase. I thank you most sincerely again for your time today, and I will try to answer any questions you may have of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to hear from a few more people, but at this time I may ask the board if there's questions, because we've heard testimony from the landowner and from the commissioner. If I could ask, Commissioner, why didn't the board appeal the court's decision?
I would probably have to consult with my county attorney. It felt like we thought it was better to let it stand and learn lessons from it in case we have to go down this road again.
Okay. And listening to the reasons and on both sides of this, how do you respond, Commissioner, to it's Mr. Sontegard's land? Why would you and the board have the control over that? Because you certainly wouldn't want to take authority to force someone to sell their land. So why is this different?
It's an excellent question, and it's one we wrestled with more than any other. The vote of our board was 4-1 on this matter, and I believe that is the single primary reason why there was a 1. It's a good question. I think we wrestled with it, but we saw the trend and decided that the collective long-term interests of the people of Lackawanna County were beginning to be threatened if this trend continues, and that outweighed that issue. Because I'm with you on that. That's the thing that I struggled with the most. I don't want anybody telling me what to do with my property, and I understand that. But I also think if the goal was to sell the property for a fair price, Mr. Sontegard had options besides selling to the public. That's the best answer I have for that question, sir.
And you mentioned, Commissioner, about this idea of folks not hearing it and in hearing in other parts of the state. Is it possible that Lackaparle's interest may be the interest of the states or may not be of the greater good of the state? Would someone living in, say, Blue Earth County have an interest in what happens in Lackaparle County?
Well, I think we all have an interest in what happens all over our state. We don't all live in silos, but my job is to represent the people who gave me my job, and they're telling me we do enough already in this regard. We are very conscious of the environment. We value conservation, habitat, and wildlife, and we're doing enough. Our populations are shrinking out here, and we want to be able to sustain our schools. And when one parcel of land disappears, you can't draw a correlation to one family disappearing, but when thousands of acres disappear over a few years, then a few family farms will no longer be able to be there. And we're fighting that. So that was our motivation for this decision.
This is maybe for you, Assistant Commissioner Richards. What about this argument that the DNR is paying too much? Because the way I understand it, Commissioner, from a fiduciary responsibility, the county's going to do better by this than they would have before. So those schools and those roads are actually going to get an influx of money. How does the DNR respond to that? And then I'm going to turn for a minute to Mr. Sontegard, if he had private requests for this and about that piece of land. So Mr. Richards, if you could answer first about that argument that we're paying too much and distorting land prices.
I Thank you, Governor. Yes, so under state law, we can only offer the appraised value. There are some provisions that allow us to go beyond appraised value, but we offer appraised value, and that's the estimated market value for the property. So we have appraisers on staff. We hire third-party appraisers, and we go about our offers in a very structured way based on market value. In addition to that, as I talked about earlier, the payment in lieu of taxes in this case is more than the taxes generated by private ownership. I'd have to get specific numbers, but it's I think the taxes for this parcel were somewhere in the range of $1,300 to $1,500, and the payment in lieu of taxes is $700 to $1,000 more than that for these parcels from the payment in lieu of taxes perspective. And then, Governor, I would maybe just add quickly that DNR, we do care deeply about our relationship with Lackawanna County, and we are working with our Director of Fish and Wildlife and our folks to set up some meetings to talk about their concerns about long-term trends in the area. And so that's in process right now to work on those relationships.
Well, I certainly would encourage that, because the commissioner is speaking for the voice of his constituents, and if it's a concern of the commissioner, it's a concern of his constituents. And I think that communication is a big piece of it. Mr. Sondergaard, we'll turn to you. You're at the center of this. You're a landowner, private landowner. I just asked if you had any other private offers, and then if you could just describe this parcel to me, if you would.
Number one, I did have one young family call me concerning it, and they did give me an offer of like $100 an acre. It was not the kind of piece of land that they liked to farm, but they were willing to farm it for that type of price value. I thought it was undervalued. It's broken up into several fields. It's in high water years, or the years where you have a lot of moisture. You have a very hard time planting it. You probably aren't going to plant it till the first week of June, although some years that can be changed to function how dry it is. We're in general like to make a fair return. That's just frank and honest and upfront. And the land is poorly, very poorly from the standpoint of agriculture and being able to get a normal harvest or crop off it.
All right. Other members of the board, I think Auditor Blaha, you saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. I wanted to hop in here for just a moment. I know as we're talking about this, and this is kind of from my perspective as someone who gets to look at local budgets quite a bit, I think we talk about the calculation about what is the impact, economic impact on these choices. And I think I do disagree with one comment by Mr. Richards, where it said that this would be not negatively affected. Because I think you're looking at, again, the payment in lieu of taxes. You might say, hey, if you look at that that variable, sure, it looks like, hey, this is going to be fine. But that is, I think, just as Commissioner Patzer was saying, that's not the entire equation, right? We know that if your goal is to maintain population, if your goal is to have kind of an ongoing economic development, that recreation versus agriculture could be quite different impacts. I mean, so the idea of even with payment in lieu of taxes being a little higher, that the other effects may not let you support a school because people are going to move. So it's I think we should be really careful when we just look at one number and say that is capturing what the impact on the community is. Again, I think that this issue is frankly again kind of a local control issue, and so as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at kind of the ultimate level of local control, which is kind of with the property owner. But I think we need to be really careful that we don't dismiss Commissioner Patzer's, I think, very real concerns and very, I think, accurate statement that this has a bigger economic impact than any one or two numbers is going to show. Thank you.
No, fair enough. Attorney General Nelson, we have a couple speakers on board. Would you like to comment now or hear from them?
I can hear from them, Governor. The conversation has been really fascinating, and both you and the auditor have asked some of my questions.
Well, at this time, the board has received written statements in support of the land transfer from Backcountry's Hunters and Anglers, Minnesota Outdoor Heritage Alliance, Minnesota Conservation Federation, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, but also some private landowners. Diane Borgendale, and I see Ms. Borgendale is here, Ann Borgendale, Jean Tokheim, and Brian and Janine Waltowitz. We have two folks who would like to speak on this. Ms. Borgendale, I received your letter. I didn't know if you wanted to speak. You are certainly welcome if you'd like to at this time.
All right, thank you. And actually, Diane is my mother, and I'm Ann Borgendale, her daughter. And I did send a statement, and which echoes a lot of the points that the DNR had brought up. But if you want, I maybe can depart from that a little bit and just speak a little bit more as a Lackawanna County resident. So where I'm sitting today is roughly 3 miles from the parcel in question. I live in Lackawanna Township on a farm that my great-great-grandfather homesteaded 151 years ago, and that my own family, when I was growing up, was an active dairy farm for 30 years. I also co-own farmland with my siblings about 2 miles from the parcel in question. And I guess first, as a private landowner in the area, I'll just address that we definitely appreciate the right and ability that when we are interested at some point possibly of selling land, that we can do so without interference from the county. And I'll also say too, from a economic and quality of life standpoint as well too, that I think the county does see a lot of benefit from having, especially marginal farmland, return to a more natural state. It is for the benefit, say, of game and non-game wildlife, birds and pollinators, but also to this whole county, the whole region at one point before it was settled and turned into farmland was tall grass prairie and prairie potholes. And that's virtually non-existent across western Minnesota and Lackawanna County at this point in time. Yes, we do have more acres than some counties in habitats, but it's still the vast majority of the county is in farmland, cultivated farmland. I think according to the 2017 USDA Census of Agriculture, about 89% of Lackawanna County is in cultivated acres, and that there are many people who are able to use those for hunting lands. But it's also, I think there is a great benefit to people who live out here when there is land that isn't all in row crop agriculture, that we do see benefit from better water quality, that the WMA land is able to hold and filter more water, which benefits Lackawanna County and the whole state in general. And that also just 80 acres is a small parcel compared to what used to cover the county, but that it's help to the people who live out here as far as having some of those wild and natural spaces. I feel very fortunate that I do have plenty of acres and some natural area around my family's farmstead and where I live that I'm able to enjoy the outdoors. But there are plenty of people who live in Lackawanna County who do not own land parcels to be able to get out and enjoy nature as much as some. So having more of those acres does increase that for some. Sorry, I'm home with my son who's sick today as well here. Sorry about that. Also too, yes, Lackawanna County has seen a population decrease over the past 20 years. I believe the county has lost about 2,000 people, though more personal opinion there, I don't think that's just from an 80-acre parcel or from state and federal government taking land. There's many other greater factors adding to the population decrease. And if people are looking for areas to, sorry about that. Also too,
it's the life we all live. So
I know, it kind
we
of
totally
is,
understand.
Yes. Also, too, from a standpoint of people being able to participate, too, I appreciate that I was able to be here, but also it is a little bit harder for residents in general to participate with kids in longer meetings and stuff. So I appreciate that, too, and that he's almost sorry, showing how sometimes it's hard to participate in the public process. I'm sorry there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit, but I think you got some of my major points there as wanting to be able to control private property and sell it as you wish. But that I think there is a local economic and just benefit to those in the area to seeing more of those lands rewilded. And that where I'm at too, it's quite often, maybe there is one farm site per acre. There are many farm sites where there were people who lived there when I was growing up here, those are abandoned now. And it's not just because government is buying up land, it's many different factors contributing to that. And I hope And for the sake that I am raising a child here, that I want to see the county continue to be robust and have strong schools, strong roads as well. And I think we can still do that with having some more state and federal lands out here, and that does provide a big benefit to kids growing up out here and families and visitors as well. So thanks for listening, and thank you for letting my son contribute here as well too. So I'm going to mute myself, and if you have more questions, please ask. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgendahl. Who is this with you?
This is my son Julian, who's 3. So he's actually the sixth generation to live on my family's farm, and we don't actively farm at the moment. We actually do rent our farmland to a neighbor as well too at the moment, but it's still a wonderful place to live and to participate in the community out here. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Julian. At this time, I want to recognize Mr. Greg Qualley, who is representing backcountry hunters and anglers. So, Mr. Qualley, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you very much, Governor and members of the Land Exchange Board. My name is Greg Qualley. I'm a board member from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and our organization is dedicated to preserving access to our public lands and waters and the rights to hunt, fish, and recreate on those public lands. I'm just going to digress for a moment. I've been on the whole time this morning, and I really appreciated the fact that you got to meet the State Board of Investment Director on this meeting, and it was just fabulous. Deep background here. I'm a past DNR employee, retired. I worked for the Division of Lands and Minerals. After retirement, I actually formed a private appraisal practice, so I'm very familiar with the valuing of land and actually have valued a number of properties for the DNR out in Lac-La-Parle County. So with that said, I think there's a couple procedural things here that I'd like to address, and I'd just like to thank Mr. Sonstegard for his effort in bringing this before the Land Exchange Board. He did it at definitely a high cost financially to him, and I am sure also psychologically. This is a tough effort. It's a contentious issue, and it always will be. There's always been tension between the Department of Natural Resources and the county boards on land acquisitions, and there always will be. One thing I would like to point out that came to my attention early in the process was that the DNR chose not to actually bring this issue to the Land Exchange Board, but instead referred it to the landowner to file suit in court in order to get a determination to bring it to the State Lands Exchange Board, which I think I would like to encourage the DNR to be more proactive in these situations and take these contested cases directly to the Land Exchange Board and not put the private landowner who has a right to sell his land to anybody he wants, to take this up with the Land Exchange Board directly instead of forcing legal action by a private landowner. So I think that's a procedural thing that the board might want to consider and maybe request of the DNR. And I know I'm asking a lot here, but I think it's something that you should consider. And with that, I'll close my remarks out. Again, I'd like to encourage the DNR to take these things directly to the Land Exchange Board, and thank you to landowner Sonstegard for pursuing this issue and really helping us clarify some of these debates over public land ownership and public land acquisition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Qualley. I'm going to ask if there's any questions of the board, and I would just note this has been both an interesting and a challenging one. That this is something new, as was stated by Assistant Commissioner Richards, and I think all of us, as we've heard this, that this one particular land exchange is probably a proxy for a lot of other things, for a shifting demographic in Greater America, for a conscious understanding of an economy that's changing in a way of life that may be, and it adds some real nuance to this. And I would like to note, I think Commissioner Pretzer, looking at this on paper and reading the court's orders, seems a little more cut and dry. Hearing you and your reasoning, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're representing folks. I have made, and I think I would just state, I believe very strongly in these county boards. This would make this one's a bit of a challenge for me because the landowner is the principal priority in this, but whether it be Minnesota taking the position that only 2 other states did, that the bulk of our money for COVID relief would go to counties because we believe the county commissioners knew a better way to do that in their particular instance. County program aid, understanding that as money from the state cycles back to the counties, Lac-Parle's issues are different than Blue Earth, which are different than Ramsey, which are different than St. Louis County. So I want to note in this that that this is challenging on several different levels. I am going to vote in favor of the exchange because of the precedence was there in the preponderance leaning towards a landowner. But I do think Mr. Qualley brought up his point, the commissioner brought up his, and the DNR going back and looking at this. I do think one of the first things we need to do is, and I appreciate Commissioner Richards, and I know you'll pass it on to the commissioner, engaging with residents in a way that they feel heard. If Commissioner Pratzker is saying he doesn't not necessarily sure if we're hearing where they're coming from, that's a concern. And so I'd very much appreciate this, but I think this is, as I said, I think this is probably a proxy issue for others, and I don't think this will be the last one of these that comes forward. So I will turn to the members of the board if there's any further questions before I call for a vote.
Governor.
Please go ahead, AG, and then Auditor Blaha.
Yeah, I do think it's important to explain a vote so that people understand why we only get to vote nay or yay. I guess we could vote, to recuse or pass or whatever, but I do plan on voting in favor of the exchange. But I want the county commissioner to know that I am not saying that the county does not have critically important prerogatives, which absolutely must be observed. You are the experts on the local issues. We respect that. But at the same time, it's been an age-old principle in this country that if you own land, you can sell it to who you want to. There might be some restrictions on that, but the bottom line is, for me, this is an issue where I'm simply yielding to the individual property owner's prerogative. But I want the own property owner to know and the county to know that this is not an easy decision, but that sometimes the right of the individual needs to be observed. But I do hope that everybody listening to this meeting today understands that, but there are also community interests involved, which is why this matter comes before us. It is something that needs to be aired out publicly and discussed, and I think that is appropriate. I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote, but I do want to thank the commissioner and his colleagues for their work and their everything they brought up, and every argument you made, we are keeping in mind as we go forward, even if on this particular one we may not agree. Thank you.
Auditor Blaha.
Thank you, Governor. And yeah, this I really appreciated the commissioner taking some time to walk through this with me too this week. And I just want to restate again, as we're talking about this, it's difficult because we're trying to determine again what's in the public interest. I think that you could say a conservation use for this property and agricultural use for this property, both could be seen as being in the public interest. So if those things are pretty clear, so what do we look at then? And for me, one of the big kind of values of our entire office at the OSA is local control is effective. And so it's really rare for me to disagree with the county on what they want to do with their community. And I think that what's a challenge here is this is more than 80 acres, and other people said that too. It's easy to dismiss it. Well, it's just 80 acres. Well, is it the toe? Is it the toe that's over the line, or is it the line? It can feel like a death by 1,000 cuts when it's always one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, and you're trying to keep your community together in a way that isn't always obvious and easy to see in simple calculations of the budget. So I absolutely appreciate that. And so I do want to also agree with you, Commissioner, that yes, I don't believe that the result of the lawsuit would suggest that you are flippant or irresponsible. Absolutely not. I mean, this is absolutely the discussion that we need to have. And that's that longer term discussion of, sure, this is 80 acres, but how much do we buy? And what does this mean for other funds we have, other places where we're making these purchases? But again, when it comes down to it, when you've got that conflict, how local do we go? I think the ultimate local control is the individual landowner in this case. We have a willing buyer and a willing seller, and I don't think we can get in the way of that. And that really is the main reason for my vote on this. I think that there have been good points on, I've agreed with virtually everything else everybody said. But I think we need to go there on this. But I hope that people who are watching this have heard that this issue, this can't be the last of this conversation, because it is very clear that how we handle land and particularly land use is absolutely and should be an everyday discussion for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor. Yeah, I think you're right. Keeps the streak alive for 20 and 21. Nothing's easy, but I believe in this democracy. I believe in the passion of the people who came here, and I believe that this is the way that you settle disputes. And if it's done right, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions that need to go forward. So hearing that, I would now call for a motion to approve the land acquisition.
So moved.
I now ask for each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The land acquisition is approved. I want to thank you all for your time. At this time, I would now recognize DNR Lands and Minerals Division Director Joe Henderson to present a request for approval of 2 proposed land exchanges. Director Henderson, you're recognized.
Maybe that's better if you can hear me. I get to say good afternoon. We've passed noon. So as the governor said, we have 2 land exchange projects to review today. I'll start on tab 3 of your land exchange board packet with land exchange B10019. This exchange involves a St. Louis County 40-acre tax forfeited parcel being exchanged for 80 acres of private land owned by Blaine Olson and Seth Olson. The tax forfeited land is valued at $68,000 and the private land is valued at $64,000. The private party has agreed to pay the $4,000 difference in value. If completed, the land exchange will consolidate tax forfeited land holdings and increase efficiencies in land management. This property has management and access appeal to the county. The tax forfeited land acquired by the Olsons will allow them to consolidate their land holdings. Please view the colored map in your materials for a visual representation of the parcels proposed to be exchanged. As you can see on the map, the 80 acres of private land in section 18 will transfer from the Olsons to St. Louis County, and the 40 acres in section 31 will transfer from St. Louis County to the Olsons. The St. Louis County Board has approved this exchange. A public hearing was held on October 26, 2021, with no objections received. All county board resolutions are on file as evidence that all steps have been taken to comply with the law prior to submission to the Land Exchange Board for approval. It is the recommendation that the Land Exchange Board approve exchange B10019, subject to the approval of the title opinion by the Attorney General's office. This concludes my prepared remarks on this exchange. I will take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Director Henderson. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the exchange.
So moved.
Roll call vote of all members. Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. Exchange Bravo 10019 is approved. I would also recognize again Mr. Henderson to proceed on the next agenda item.
Thank you. I will now refer you to tab number 4 in your Land Exchange Board materials for Land Exchange B10020. This project involves an exchange of 70.7 acres of county tax forfeit land valued at $101,800 and 46.2 acres of fee-owned land owned by the city of Ely valued at $112,900. County assessed values were utilized for the determination of the land value and approved by the county board. Expedited exchanges under 100 acres may have that have values within 20% are allowed. Sorry, I read that wrong. This exchange falls within those acceptable parameters. The land to be acquired by St. Louis County will consolidate tax forfeit ownership and improve timber management and forest recreational opportunities for the benefit of the taxpayers of St. Louis County. The land to be acquired by the city of Ely will allow for the expansion of the city boundaries and a planned redevelopment of the area. Please view the colored map in your materials for a visual representation of the parcels proposed to be exchanged. As you can see in the materials, the 46.2 acres of land owned by the city of Ely in Section 4 will be transferred from Ely to St. Louis County, and the 70.7 acres consisting of 2 parcels in Section 34 will transfer from St. Louis County to the city of Ely. The St. Louis County Board approved the expedited exchange project and land values on March 23rd, 2021. Under Minnesota statute section 94.3495, title insurance was utilized to meet the examination title requirement. Title commitments have been approved by St. Louis County. Resolutions are on file as evidence that all steps have been taken to comply with the law prior to submission to the Land Exchange Board for approval. Attorney General's office review is not required under this specific statute. Final approval is recommended for Land Exchange B10020 between St. Louis County and the city of Ely. Concludes my prepared remarks on this exchange project. I will take questions if you have any.
Thank you, Director Henderson. At this time, I would entertain any questions from the board on Exchange Bravo 10020. Hearing none, I'd call for a motion on approval.
So moved.
At this time, I'd ask for a roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Audra Blaha?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. Exchange Bravo 10020 is approved. I'd now like to recognize U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge Supervisor Tom Kerr and Realty Officer Daniel Kepfer to present a request for approval of certified easement acquisitions. Welcome back to both of you. You are recognized.
Thank you, Governor and members of the board. For the record, I am Danielle Kepford, the Realty Officer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Midwest region located in Bloomington, Minnesota. Also available to answer questions is Tom Kerr, Area Supervisor for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Midwest region and located in Bloomington, Minnesota as well. We are here today to request approval from the Land Exchange Board for projects in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Small Wetlands Acquisition Program. May I draw your attention to the first page behind tab 5, and the first paragraph states, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requests authorization to purchase 0.6 acres of wetland easements and 73.5 acres of habitat easements on private property in the county listed below, under the authority of Section 4C of the Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp Act of March 16, 1934, as amended, and in compliance with the provisions of the Wetlands Loan Act of 1961, as amended. The Wetlands Loan Act of 1961 requires that no land shall be acquired with monies from the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund unless the acquisition has been approved by the governor of the state or the appropriate state agency. And in Minnesota, approval is provided by the Land Exchange Board. These tracts have been certified for acquisition by the respective county boards, and the location of and legal descriptions of these acquisitions are depicted graphically and on the attached county maps in your brochures. In closing, we respectfully request approval for these acquisitions to move forward with the acquisition stated earlier, and we are available to answer any questions at this time. And I apologize for my dog.
Thank you, Ms. Kepford. That will bring mine down here now, I'm sure. So any questions from members of the board on the proposed easement acquisitions? Hearing none, I'd call for a motion to approve the request for certified easement acquisitions.
So moved.
So moved.
I would now call roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Audra Blaha?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. Any further discussion from members of the board? I'd like to thank all participants today, and I'd like to thank all citizens who tuned in to watch how things work. And once again, I would say Winston Churchill made the comment that this democracy is the worst form of government except every other. I would disagree with him. I would say that the citizens make this work, and that we bring our issues and debate them, and that the boards and the citizens that interact today are passionate about this great state, and I, for one, am grateful. Final comments from the board? I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And now I ask each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion to adjourn. This meeting of the Land Exchange Board is adjourned. We'll see you all soon.